Welcome to the channel where hindsight's always 2020. Talking about these topics at your local church will always get you black flagged. Buckle up. Okay, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be the second video about food, and just to kind of recap, we went over Acts chapter 10, Peter's vision, and the summary of that is we cannot yet say that that Jesus has made all things clean as far as food. We can't use Acts chapter 10 for that. So today, or on this video, we're going to go over Mark chapter 7. We're going to cover the whole thing. Where in the world? A little booklet go. So there's a number of places that we can use, or that is used in the New Testament, that people use for the argument to be able to eat anything we want, or that Jesus made all foods clean. But the problem is, food was already clean. So this is a redefining of what food is. What we're doing is we are redefining things that are not food, such as pork, as food, because nowhere in scripture do we see a pig being consumed as food in a good thing at all. There is a place in Isaiah where it talks about people who are consuming swine flesh. You might want to go look that up for yourself. No, I'm not going to give it to you. Go find it. So anyway, to conclude the recap, we're doing this because we want to be able to prove without a shadow of a doubt that on Judgment Day that we're okay before our Creator, before our King, for the simple reason of, if He didn't make pork clean, if we can't eat pork, bacon, if we're not supposed to, I would like to know that for myself before my King, not before man, but before my King. So I don't trust man enough to be able to lead me in the right path, being that I've seen too many times where He led me wrong, even though He didn't mean to, and even though it wasn't on purpose. That's what happened. So we need to reevaluate these things to see whether or not what we practice in our life, in our faith, is directed by God or not, according to His word. And again, I'm using New King James for simple reason of most people will have one, and if they don't have one, those people will normally have at least a King James, and it'll be easy to follow along. Is the reason why we're using New King James, to keep it simple. So let's dive right in. Let's see where this takes us. I've got no notes before me today. We're literally just going to go through the word. We're going to go through chapter 7 of Mark. Okay. This is one of many places that's used. So do your homework. Go find out what people are using. Go before it. Get caught up before we cover it. Okay. So, in fact, bear with me. So, in fact, I'll give them to you right here. Bible references for the food topic. Okay, I'm going to give you every one of them from Old Testament to New Testament. Genesis 9, verses 3 and following. Isaiah 65, verse 3 and following. Isaiah 66, verse 17. Matthew 15, verses 1 through 20. Mark 7, verses 1 through 23. Acts 10, basically the whole entire chapter of Acts 10. Just short of the whole chapter. Acts 15. Romans 14. Just get familiar with the whole chapter. 1 Corinthians 10, 23 to 33. First Timothy 4, 1 through 5. Luke 10, verses 7 and 8. Get familiar with those passages because we'll touch on those passages as we go along. We may not turn the page to them specific places, but I'll probably talk about some of them from time to time. Okay, Mark chapter 7. Then the Pharisees and some of the scribes came together to him, to Jesus, having come from Jerusalem. Now when they saw some of his disciples, Jesus' disciples, eat bread with defiled, that is, with unwashed hands, they had fault. Before we even continue, I don't want to make this video too terribly long, but before we continue, you need to understand what's going on in this very moment right here. Okay, so the Pharisees are proclaiming that the hands of the disciples are defiled because they're unwashed when they're eating bread. So we see in Matthew 23, Jesus rebukes the Pharisees over and over again, and he's basically talking about how they're replacing God's commandments with their own commandments. So basically, they have a commandment that has since been recorded in the Talmud, which the Talmud is a collection of a couple of different writings. It's not the Talmud itself. It's Talmud subgrouped into other, say, Takanot or man-made laws and traditions. Okay, one of them is the washing of the hands before they eat bread. And they'll even say a little prayer, which I'm not going to get into any of that, but they'll say a little prayer when they wash their hands when they eat bread. And if you don't do that before you eat bread, the rabbis say that you're eating with defiled hands. Okay. And also, too, these stone water pots, these are the same things that Jesus turned water into wine in. Just remember that, because I'm going to cover that one day. Okay, so verse 3. Well, back up a little bit. So let's go back to verse 2. Now, when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is, with unwashed hands, they found fault. The Pharisees and all the Jews, and we remember, if you watched video 1, who a Jew is, okay, someone who lives in Judea or from the tribe of Judah, which is basically anybody in Israel at that time in the first century. You had Levi, Benjamin, and Judah all live in Judea, which makes them all of them Jews that are there. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way, holding the tradition of the elders. Okay, I mean, it's as clear as that. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other things which they have received and hold, like washing of cups, pitchers, copper vessels, and couches. Okay, do you follow that? Okay, as this has nothing to do with food yet at all. This is about being defiled because they haven't washed their hands. When the Pharisees and scribes asked Jesus, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, which is washing the hands, but eat bread with unwashed hands? He answered and said to them, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, hypocrites, as is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. So before I even start verse 8, ask yourself, what is the context so far? There's only one context in this chapter so far. Now, we're not finished the rest of the chapter, but up until this point, there's only one context, is they're eating bread with defiled hands because they didn't wash according to the rituals and the traditions of man that even Isaiah prophesied about, teaching as doctrines commandments of men. Verse 8, for laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men, the washing of pitchers and cups and many other such things that you do. You said to them, all too well, you reject the commandment of God that you may keep your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. Now, see, Jesus is bringing to the front their commandments versus God's commandments. But you say, if a man says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is korban, which, look that up, that's a temple thing that if they give money to the Pharisees, they'll call it korban, and they put a blessing on them. It's a whole big thing. It's what the Pharisees deem it in that situation, which I'm not going to get into. That's too far of a rabbit trail. But they say that is a gift to God. Then you no longer let him do anything for his father or his mother. Okay, so he actually takes them away from the blessing of God, because he can no longer honor his father or his mother, because he's basically given that honor to his father and mother over to the Pharisees. So we're still not into anything God's doing. We are totally 100% knee deep in tradition and doctrines of men through the Pharisees right now. But they make the word of God of no effect through the traditions which you have handed down, and many such things you do. And when he had called all the multitude, when Jesus called the multitude to himself, he said to them, hear me, everyone, and understand. Here's part of the problem. We'll hear him, but we won't understand. For some reason, we'll hear, but we won't understand. So let's try our best to understand this. So far up until this point, the only thing that's going on is the commandments and the doctrines of men. They're pointing fingers at Jesus' disciples for eating bread without washed hands, calling them having defiled hands, and then getting in Jesus' face about it. And that's all that's going on as of yet. Now Jesus is going to address the crowd and correct this thing that's going on. Jesus says, there's nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile him. Remember, we have to stay in context. Context is that these disciples are going to be defiled. They're defiling themselves by eating bread with unwashed hands. That's the context. Stay in the context. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. When he had entered the house away from the crowd, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. So he said to them, are you thus without understanding also? Do you not perceive whatever enters a man from outside cannot defile him? What's the context? Eating bread with defiled hands. Because it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and is eliminated, thus purifying all foods. Question: when it goes into the sewer, did you just purify it? You didn't just purify it, you purged it. So whatever you consumed left your body, it was purged. It was not purified. Okay, that's number one, which we're not going to get to the Greek about that, but verse 20, and he said, what comes out of a man? Now let's back up. 19, because it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and is eliminated. Oh, see, I skipped all over that. Let's back up to 17 so I can do my part, right? Okay, verse 17. When he had entered a house away from the crowd, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. So he said to them, are you thus without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatever enters a man from outside cannot defile him? But because it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and is eliminated, thus purifying all foods, which it doesn't purify, it purges. I don't know why they use the word purify there. And in fact, they do a context of purifying the food. I mean, that thing that's not a purified piece of food. Sorry. Verse 20, and he said, what comes out of a man that, and he said, what comes out of a man that defiles him? For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All of these things come from within and defile a man. So if we get the gist of what's going on here, the context is one thing and one thing only. It's that eating bread with the defiled hands is not going to defile you. It's not those germs and whatever else would be on your hands when you eat. Those things are not going to defile you. Now, many people have the argument that this proves that, eating pig and other things that you're not supposed to eat will not defile you. I see the point and I see how people get there, but I don't buy it because that's not the context here. The context here is not the food being eaten. Okay. Pay attention to this part, which you can disagree all you want to. I really don't care. I'm not here to debate with you. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to reevaluate and be another witness to someone who God is moving in their life to reevaluate the things that they've been taught. Okay. That's who I am. I'm just another witness. The context here has nothing to do with the food being eaten. Okay. When you put certain things into this text, you're reading into the text. You're putting something in the text that's not actually there. For the longest time, I would use this for the same thing. And we simply can't use this for that because the context of food isn't even there. When he says, purifying all foods, that doesn't even match the context of what's going on here. Okay. There's no food here being consumed that's talked about at all. Nobody's debating the food that they're eating. They're eating bread. Okay. So if anything, the context of purifying the food, that means that they just purified a food that's clean to eat. I mean, we can't have that argument because the context just simply isn't there. Next time we're going to go to, I think it's going to be Matthew 15 next time. It's basically the same topic. Yeah. Matthew 15, 1 through 20. And I chose Mark first because Mark is the area where they actually include in italics that Jesus said this to make all foods clean. If you're using one of the more modern translations like ESV or NASB or whatever else from the critical text, that's not actually in the text. But either way, for Jesus to say, even if Jesus said that, or if, to say that he made all foods clean is kind of a moot point because food's already clean. Because food is already defined as what food actually is. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out whether or not we can redefine what food is. Is there somewhere where he actually either states it or something happens to where it's like, hey, these unclean things are now clean that you can consume them as food. Because the fullest logical conclusion is anything we stick in our mouth to eat is considered food. And it's all about whether or not science says that it's safe for me to consume, because that's what we do. So the question is, can we do that and be right with God on Judgment Day? I don't want to find out when it's too late. I would rather find out now. Hope this bless you. Buckle up. Today hold, will you crush and burn?